Good evening, everybody. My name is Bryan Grossman. I'm the executive editor at the Colorado Springs Business Journal. Normally, we would just jump into our sponsors and thanking them, and then our conversation with the guests of the evening. But I did want to make a quick announcement, sort of a sidebar this evening. It's very relevant to this crowd. It's great news. So I'm going to throw out just a few numbers to set the stage and then give you sort of a timeline for a section that we're starting up. The numbers are, how many military installations in the Pikes Peak region, Bob?
There are 5.
5, that's correct. You can go now. And according to, I believe it's the Chamber of Commerce, there's about 100,000 people who in some way touch military families, whether that's veterans, active duty, guard, reserve, about 100,000 in the area. So you got a population in the county of about 800,000, I'd say. So 1 in 8 has some connection to the military. I know this fact is from the Chamber. $3.3 billion generated by the military. That was the economic impact in 2021. That was during a pandemic year, so maybe it's a little more these days.
40% of the economy comes from the military.
There you go. And one last figure here that's relevant. Every month, this was reported by the Business Journal, every month 500 military members transition to civilian life. So why is this all relevant? If you followed our publications for a while, you may know that at one point we had a branch called the Colorado Springs Military Newspaper Group, where we contracted with some of the military newspapers in town. When we transitioned to a nonprofit late that year, the contract sort of went away. And I got a call, I want to say in April, from a gentleman named Ted Robertson. Many of you probably know him through Mount Carmel. I knew Ted back in his KRDO days when he used to do radio over at KRDO. He's now with Veterans Voice. He's the media outreach coordinator. And he said in April, hey, it's really sad that this military connection went away. Can we get together and talk about possibilities? And I said, sure. He took me out for Chinese food. And then I took him on a business hike to work off the Chinese food about a week later. And the basic idea was, how can we sort of bring back this military coverage? And we came up with this concept. At first, it was going to be starting something from scratch. And I said, this sounds really good for the Business Journal. And so in this paper, I believe that's the inaugural one. No, on July 5th, we put out, it's called The Front. It's actually in the back. It's part of the Colorado Springs Business Journal section that's in the back of the Indy, and part of that now is the front. And the idea is that every single week we're going to have content that's relevant to the military community, that's really about veterans transitioning out of the military into civilian life, resources that are available. We're going to talk about mental health. We're going to talk about military spouses. In fact, the one that's in this issue is about military spouses and employment. So we're really excited about this partnership with Mount Carmel and the Veterans Voice. And we figured you would be just the people to talk to about it. So take a look and check out future issues. Now I'm going to get to the script before we bring Gina up here. All right.
We love Gina. Both Ginas.
So we're lucky to have this opportunity to get together every month and learn from our city's amazing CEOs, business owners, and leaders. We want to thank you for supporting our business community and the Business Journal. We're so grateful for the support of our sponsors who make these events possible. We appreciate our ongoing partnership with Phil Long Dealerships. They're back for their 3rd year as the top sponsor of COS CEO. Phil Long has a deep history in our city and even deeper commitment to its growth and development. Joining us sponsorship-wise this year, gold sponsor Firma IT Solutions and owner Rodney Gillette Jr. El Pomar Foundation is a special sponsor. They sponsored this program in the past. Other sponsors include Notes Live, a local and national business supporting the arts and live music. Sidebar there, they're doing their groundbreaking on the 8,000 person amphitheater right after this. So if you're bored, head up north for Notes Live. Stockman, Cass, Ryan and Company, providing the best accountants for business needs. Let's hear it for our amazing sponsors. And now please welcome Gina Sacripanti, Chief Communications Officer with Phil Long Dealerships, to introduce our guest and to tell us more about Phil Long, which is celebrating 78 years in Colorado and decades of philanthropic work for our communities.
Okay. Thank you, Bryan, and thank you all for being here tonight. I also would like to say thank you to the team at CSBJ, to Amal Gray for hosting us here, this beautiful venue, and to our fellow sponsors. As Bryan said, we are very proud to be the presenting sponsor of this series, bringing the business community together, and to be serving Coloradans for their vehicle needs for over 78 years. We also are very honored to be recently recognized by the voters of the Colorado Springs Business Journal as the #1 best in business auto dealer here in Colorado Springs. Yeah, let's give it up. And that honor, actually, this is our 4th year in receiving that honor. So we're very deeply honored by the readers. And the icing on that cake is that the readers of the Colorado Springs Indy also voted us #1 military-friendly auto dealer this year. So we are very proud to be here tonight. And I say that, but all of that is due to our team of dedicated employees who really, day in and day out, strive to provide excellent service and a premier car buying experience. And our commitment to this community is done daily throughout our Phil Long enterprise. July is an especially important month for us at Phil Long dealerships. Earlier this month, as patriots, we celebrated our nation's independence and our freedom. As employees of Phil Long Enterprise, we also celebrated our rich military history, starting with our founder, Mr. Philip Long, a decorated World War II Hellcat pilot, to our current president and CEO, Jay Cimino, and to our hundreds of veterans and military employees and their family members. As former President Barack Obama said, in the face of impossible odds, those who love this country can make anything possible. Tonight, I'm deeply honored to celebrate and introduce Bob McLaughlin, who is that person who is changing our community for the better. Despite being raised by military veterans, Bob McLaughlin had no plans to enter the military when he was deciding on a college. It didn't take him long for the Lexington, Massachusetts native to reconsider. A few of his rugby teammates had entered the University of Massachusetts ROTC program, and by his sophomore year, McLaughlin was fully entrenched in the competitive nature of a military career. As an artillery officer and fire support coordinator, McLaughlin commanded units in Africa and Iraq. That's where he witnessed the extreme toll that combat inflicts on soldiers. Throughout his career, McLaughlin would often return from combat deployments only to be tasked with preparing statewide units for further deployments, units that included veterans of previous conflicts. Fast forward to 2009, and McLaughlin found himself leading the garrison at Fort Carson. That's also when he met Jay Cimino, a former Marine and local car dealer, now president and CEO of the Phil Long family of dealerships. Cimino came up with the idea of creating an organization that could help local veterans adapt to civilian life. Though intrigued by the idea, McLaughlin still had several years of military service to complete, including another year-long deployment to Afghanistan. Years later, Cimino had solidified the idea of creating Mount Carmel Veterans Service Center in Colorado Springs, and was finally able to convince McLaughlin to end his 28-year military service and come on board as executive director. Interviewing Bob is Mr. Bryan Grossman, the Business Journal's executive editor. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Bob McLaughlin as our speaker tonight.
Let it die down. Hi, Bob.
Hello.
Good to see you again.
Good to be here.
Why don't we start with the easiest question? Can you talk about your path, maybe in a little more detail, from Massachusetts to Colorado Springs?
It's west, about a couple thousand miles. So
hard to go east.
It's that when you look at what a young person that's in college, when you're making life decisions, And for me, it was, if anyone has seen Animal House and John Belushi, when I tell people the story, I was sitting in my dorm room and Niedermeyer popped on my shoulder and said, "Fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life," if you remember that. So I had an epiphany as a college kid. I said, look, what am I going to do with my life? And I was always intrigued with the military. I'm Lexington, Massachusetts, the birthplace of independence, the shot heard around the world. We celebrated, it's embedded in people up there, the struggle for independence, which is okay. Where's my queen? There she is. So we just celebrated Independence Day, and for me, it was something that I always was intrigued with. I knew veterans, and I just made the decision to do it. And I went to the Marines. God bless them. They said, "Okay, big boy, get on the scale," and I did. And they said, "No room at the inn for you." Then I went to the Army ROTC, and they said, "Can you lose 30 pounds in 2 months?" And I did. And 30 years later, here I am, right? Actually, 40 years later. So, those of you who have served understand the importance of service, right? And the camaraderie of service. And for me, I knew from the beginning, from the time I joined, that I was going to stay in until they kicked me out. And in this case, I went from the U.S. Army to the Chimino Army, so I'm still serving and very, very, very happy to do that.
Now, you came from a military family, is that right?
Well, my mom, God bless her, was a Marine. So my mother served in the Women's Auxiliary of Boston in the 50s as a clerk typist, and she went to Quantico for a 2-week course. So she was, her discharge paper, and she had a flag on her casket. She's a discharged private in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And my dad was in the Air Force. Not career, but they both were in the military.
Yeah. What was the environment like as far as the military and the country when you joined up? Because things have obviously changed over the past 20 years.
Clearly I came in the Reagan era, mm-hmm. and there was an upshift in service, and literally in that time frame in the 80s, I served in Germany, and there were a lot of Vietnam veterans still serving, and our military was transitioning to an all-volunteer force, mm-hmm. and there was a lot more of us then, and especially fighting the Cold War, you learn from the Vietnam era guys, and literally in my 30-year career, there's a bond with even though I have 5 tours overseas in bad places, when I was in Germany with that group, we have quite a bond, and we were all second lieutenants together, and there's still a group of us that are almost 60, some above, that when we see each other, we're 22 years old again.
Yeah.
So the bond is pretty important.
Yeah. Talk about Mount Carmel.
Well, I feel this is great because it's happy hour, right? And those of you who know me know that throughout my Army career and good and bad times, I used to say cheese and crackers, because cheese and raise your hand if you disagree with me. Whenever there's cheese and crackers in the room, you're normally happy, and there's normally a beverage to go with it. So right now there's cheese and crackers, there's people, there's beverages. I'm happy. Okay. And I got an opportunity this week, thanks to Bryan, to brief City Council, and I got to talk about Mount Carmel, and I also got to go into the mayor's office and talk about suicide prevention. And earlier today, we briefed a military organization. Kristen, we briefed the Wichita people. So the theme in the last 2 days, for me, last 3 days actually, has been, we, this community, you, Mount Carmel. I'm privileged to do it, right? We, the Mount Carmel Veterans Service Center team, and many of you are community ambassadors, and of course the boss is here, Gina. So we, for me it's a gift to be able to do this, right? To go from serving our military to serving our veterans. And what we do every day as a 501c3 in public-private partnership in this community is so important. Not one organization can do everything, but I'd like to think we're the apex of making sure that those who served are cared for every day. And I think we've got the right mix. Those of you who were here at the beginning, when first Jay kind of I had generals in my life, and then Jay ordered me, you will retire and start this. And then I consulted my real boss, Cindy. My wife Cindy's right over there. And Cindy said, just do it, right? So
First I said, you are not selling cars.
probably should have said yes, would have a bigger house. But it's such a funny story, which we'll get into as we talk here. But to do this, to be able to come from an organization like the Garrison at Fort Carson, and some of the team is here. Perry, you guys raise your hand. Thanks for being with me during that, Margaret, during that time frame. And we did great things. We the Fort Carson team did amazing things. I'm getting to the answer.
Sure.
So
Take your time.
Thank you. So in 2009, the Army, those of you, how many veterans? I mean, the Army and all services, we were struggling with how do we care for our service members and uphold discipline and standards? And we weren't very good at it, because what we did, and I served as a task force commander during the surge in Iraq, is lowered our enlistment standards. We took people in our military with pre-existing conditions, put them in the meat grinder, and then expected them to behave. And it didn't happen, right? People struggled. People did things that were illegal, unethical, immoral, and then we summarily kicked them out, which was probably not the right thing to do. And I was in the middle of coming from a combat tour to operating the Garrison at Fort Carson to try to decide how to better do that, how to help people be whole, how to build resiliency, how to build a resiliency center, which we built. And that's frankly when Jay and I, we already did a lot of things together. You know, he started thinking, I would love to do something to help veterans in Colorado Springs. And I already had orders to Afghanistan, and I thought he was smoking some funny stuff, and I didn't pay much attention. But he was adamant. He goes, you know, come back from Afghanistan safe. Cindy was here. Jay and Emily took great care of Cindy and Gina as well. They were very good to her while I was deployed. And I said, what a great guy, you know. And of course, Jay is already plotting, right? And then when I came back from my tour in Afghanistan, he kind of lowered the boom on me. He said, I can't wait much longer. You need to really consider this. And that's when I got the vote of confidence from Cindy to do it. And I retired. And actually, Gina, thanks for helping us get the house. Cindy went through the whole process as I was away purchasing a house here. So now we have a nest, and I have a vision. And for about a year, when I was away from my family in Texas, I did a year in Afghanistan, then a year in Texas. Not very good for military family, if you guys are aware of that, right? Jay kept talking to me about what we were going to do. So I was looking at the future. You know, in military transition is difficult for whoever you are. You know, it's challenging for me. I knew that I had that I had the passion to do this, and the future was bright, and we were going to do great things. The family was in good hands here. When I came back and retired, we started, and I told Jay right from the get-go, I said, if we're going to do this, we have to have a place to do it. How many of you have not been to Mount Carmel? So if you haven't been, take my card and come over and see it. And it's pretty remarkable to have a place to execute these services. So for me, I showed up on August 12th, 2014. I had a nice tie on. I showed up, I got an office, and I was scared to death, right? I'm like, my God, we're going to start a nonprofit, and it's just me, and there's a building that's being fixed. How do we do this? So is this too long of an answer, or should I continue? So I went to the community. Many of you probably remember this. I consulted with my community friends, and they said, if you're going to help military and veterans, you got to do education, counseling and assistance, legal counseling and assistance, benefits counseling and assistance, housing assistance, and financial assistance. So we built it based on those 5 things. That lasted about 2 months, and then we inherited, through a great partnership with Jonathan Liepert, the Transition and Employment Department. So my 2 things were helping with immediate needs and transition and employment. And then we started a counseling center. I never thought we were going to do that, but when I went through my own transition through the VA, I watched the way the mechanism was working, and I said, we got to do better. I'm a strong partner with the VA, but to be able to have a place that's low barrier, where people come in and can get counseling, is pretty fantastic. We've been doing it since 2016. And then what's really important, a year ago, we built the Next Chapter program. So we're partnered with UC Health to help prevent veteran suicide. Now, the statistics in El Paso County are reduced. Can we attribute that to Next Chapter? I hope this part of it attributed to that, but it's a great program that's low barrier for anybody that needs assistance. They don't have to identify that I'm suicidal. They have to just say, I need help. So we're going to keep growing that. We expanded it into Pueblo. We're in Teller County, and the state likes it, so we're going to do more. The mayor of Aurora is coming down next week to talk to us. And then we did become the state Veteran Business Outreach Center. So these things, keep coming in the right direction, and I keep saying I'll take them, which I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I believe in accepting and mitigating risk so you can help save lives and make lives better. So that's how it got started. That's where we are today, in a nutshell.
So you touched on some of your responsibilities now and how they've added up over time with Mount Carmel. Can you go way back and talk about some roles you've had, especially active duty, and your position as garrison commander, and I guess how that impacted you, these different leadership positions, and what were they?
Well, so for me, when you talk about military service, when young men and women join our military, especially after 9/11, they know there's a 100% chance they're going to go into harm's way. They know that. And our military was geared for that for the last 20 years, and your tax-paying dollars go into very good training, but there's always the human aspect, right? When you read books or know about history with people who are heroes and what they do, everybody's afraid. If people tell you they're not afraid, 90% of them are lying. So to be a leader in those situations, you have to encourage people to assume risk and lead from the front, right? So the idea of leading from the front means you don't ask anyone to take any risk that you wouldn't take, literally. So for me personally, as a commander, that was paramount in my leadership, that I wouldn't ask them to do anything that I wouldn't do. And it takes a toll. It takes a toll on you as a leader. It takes a toll on your troops, and you always have to be guarded against overstepping your boundaries, right, Sergeant Major? So for me, that was the first thing that shaped my leadership coming out of the military. Lead from the front, right? That doesn't mean you're going to be in harm's way. It means if there's a risk to be taken, you take it. You show the people that you're willing to take a risk to do something good. So for me, the thing that shaped me the most in transition was lead from the front, set a positive example, and I'll tell you this, for those of you who have served, the fighting spirit of Americans, regardless of what you hear, will never die. From the Revolutionary War in Lexington, when I wasn't at the Battle of Lexington Concord, but throughout history and into the future, Americans will never surrender the ability to defend this nation. There'll be young men and women that'll always step up to do the right thing, especially in the most dire of circumstances. It is unbelievable for me to be associated with patriots who have, at all ranks, who have done amazing things in tumultuous conditions, from general to private. So now that I'm doing Mount Carmel, I'm committed to help anybody that's struggling. So having experienced watching service and sacrifice with the soldiers that I led, with the people that led me, that shaped me too, the idea of camaraderie and teamwork and taking it out into this community, which is a military-friendly community. So I'm privileged to do this, to be able to take those lessons, work with community partners, many who are veterans, many who are not, to do team building, to do leadership where you set a positive example and others will follow. I always say a combat multiplier is a positive attitude, right? If you come every day to your workplace, whatever you do, and are positive, people around you will eat it up. It'll be infectious. And if you do just the opposite, it'll have that effect as well.
Talk about being a garrison commander, especially for those who aren't really familiar with the inner workings. What does that mean? Some have likened it to being the mayor of a small city.
Yeah, I hate
or
that.
a big city.
Yeah.
Fort Carson's not small.
I always hated that, Cindy. I said, I'm not a mayor. That's an elected official. I'm a commander. There's a difference.
Yes, sir.
But, well, thank you very much. But what I didn't, I went kicking and screaming when I first found out because I wanted to lead a combat brigade because that's what I was trained to do. God works in mysterious ways, right? So to me, I'm here today, obviously, because I had that position. And in this community, people who are leading the infrastructure of military installations, whether it's Peterson, Carson, Schriever, the Academy, they're responsible to make sure they're caring for the welfare of our troops and their families. That's one of the biggest premises of Mount Carmel, and their families. So for me and Cindy specifically, working together, my spouse, the lovely Simpson, with 5 children, wasn't a paid employee, but she was vested in this, like all military spouses are, in making sure that families are cared for. So for 3 years of my life in that position, we both, and she did it too, we did everything we could to make sure our families were cared for. Programs and services. One of the things that really solidified Jay and my relationship was building the resiliency campus on Fort Carson, right? The Army was really looking, how do we help military members and their families stay resilient, right? They're going on multiple deployments, they're suffering from loss, they're separated, some are wounded physically and emotionally. So we built, that was one of my roles, to be able to do that, to be able to deliver a place that's still going to help with wellness. One of the things I'm very proud of, and Cindy and I attended a seminar Saturday night for the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, for TAPS. We as a nation owe families of the fallen the most, right? First, we owe the fallen the most because they're the real heroes. And then those who they left behind will never have them again. So we have to do the most for them every day. So we built a Fallen Heroes Family Center on Fort Carson for Gold Star families, which was a huge undertaking, and very proud that we did that. And then we did a lot for wounded warriors too. So for me, I was not deploying, I was not training to fight, I was training to preserve the force. And I was honored to do it, right? And if I wasn't doing that, I probably would have never met Jay and Gina, and I wouldn't be here today. So, God works in mysterious ways to have that job, to connect to the Chiminos, and to be able to take it to the next level. I'm privileged to do it.
Here's an industry question for you. I'm interested in your perspective on this. And you mentioned young women, men and women, willing to stand up and serve the country. I think I saw that military recruitment, Army recruitment was, I think, 30% short of targeted numbers for this last cycle. So woefully understaffed maybe going into the future. What's the answer to that? Why do you think it's happening, and what's the answer?
Well, we can open that up to the group too, because everyone has an opinion on that. Mm-hmm. There's some people say, especially in the business I'm in now, people have been being killed in action for years. People have been maimed in action for years. People have been hurt, but it's never been on TV like it is today. Yeah. When these organizations advertise the sacrifices of our military and what it really looks like. So some people in the service business say, and there's actually been military leaders telling the Wounded Warrior Project, telling Tunnel for Towers, stop those commercials. because they're telling American families this is what's going to happen to your loved one. Now, I don't know the statistics there, but in my job now I hear that. So that could be one of the reasons. And I believe in my heart, and I'll always believe this, that we'll always have patriots. There'll always be people that'll step up and serve. I will never say that a generation is selfish or doesn't want to serve, because there'll always be those who want to serve. I just think that, we've gone through a lot as a nation in the last couple of years. I mean, the way we pulled out of Afghanistan was not very popular. As a soldier, having been there, I would tell you got to stop sometime, and it'll never be pretty. But that wasn't good, and how it was televised wasn't good either. We actually helped repatriate some Afghans here to Colorado Springs, and we helped deal with mitigating some issues that veterans might have had. So I'm optimistic that who's a Marine? Anybody? Anyone a Marine? Marines aren't missing their numbers. They're right on.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of different reasons. But I'm optimistic that people will never surrender what we have as a nation. Mm-hmm. I always, when I get to talk casually with people about the fall of the Roman Empire, they outsourced their military, they took their eye off the ball of the harmful nature of the world, and they fell. You say it with tongue in cheek, but you got to guard against that, right? You can't be pronounced as what people say is the greatest nation without service and sacrifice.
Yeah.
Right, where democracy lives. So I'm just because I'm optimistic, I know that people won't let that fall.
Mm-hmm. So I know the military was attractive to a lot of people decades ago because you got potentially could be educated and get a college degree, but now even Starbucks is paying for people to, baristas to go to college. Or is there more incentive needed, do you think, or just sort of a rethinking of what it means to serve?
There's the Marine Corps model that says, hey, your incentive is to be a champion, right? If that's your incentive, you're going to be one of the best. Mm-hmm. And that's good, because some, young men and women sometimes want to be challenged. Yeah. And I think that's important. And what attracts people to organizations like the military is the teamwork and the mission. So I'm hoping that we can continue to do that and build on it. Other than that, it's just about selling the idea of, our democracy isn't free. Mm-hmm. Somebody has to defend it, because there's people out there that don't want us to be like we are. And I believe it, even though we're struggling today with numbers, that there'll always be people that want to serve. One of the things that came out about 5 years ago is our military was incestual, especially the Army. It was only military families that served. And I always said, what's wrong with that, right? What's wrong with having a generation of military service? It doesn't make us into a coup. It just makes more patriots. Mm-hmm. I'm just hoping that more people will be drawn to do that and serve for their nation.
You talked earlier about leading from the front. Do you have examples of how that's worked well for you? And do you have any other sort of career secrets that have led to your success?
Well, clearly, we go by success monthly, right? Are we okay? So leading from the front, right? Anyone who's in a leadership position, what makes organizations strong is that the people who are with you know that you're not going to hang them out to dry. That if there's a tough situation, you're gonna be there to assist. For me, it's making sure that our services are strong, making sure that our programs are effective, and then clearly, I was afraid at the beginning. Yes, Gina, I was afraid. I didn't want to intimidate my employees to say, look, you all have to be fundraisers, right? So what I've graduated to believe in the nonprofit world is that every employee is a fundraiser. That doesn't mean they have to go ask for money. That means they have to do good services. Mr. Cimino's mantra to me was, do good work and the money will come. And I said, you're crazy. But if you ever look at our spreadsheets of what we've done over the last 9 years, he's absolutely right, because when I show it to him, the number of people we serve go up, the people who support us go up, and it's true. He's truly visionary in understanding that, and I wasn't prepared to understand that, and he had to beat it into me. You know, when you look at Jay Cimino, one of the most successful businessmen that I've ever met, never talks about money, never. And if you do, you won't get the wooden spoon, but close. So to have the mantra when you're talking about service and best practices and vision, and then money will come, I mean, I was terrified at the beginning, but he was right. He said, do good work and the money will come. So for me, leading from the front in this business means make sure the work is good, make sure the customers are being cared for, and then you have to go out and ask people to support you, and let your staff do the work that they need to do, and get people to help them do it.
Who inspired you? Did you have mentors in your life? Your mom being a Marine, probably.
Oh yeah, my mom.
Yeah, all right.
You know, when you look at the term mentor, it means someone who advises you or motivates you. And many of you are in the room. Cindy is obviously a mentor because she motivates, inspires me every day. Gina does. She sets me straight when I go off the deep end, tells me to take a deep breath and drive on. Bryan has done it many times with what he has done with his leadership positions. Camille all the time. But you know, coaching and counseling doesn't have to come from someone that's higher up in the chain. It comes from friends. Rich, you too. Kristen, you too. I mean, in the room, Ekta, I mean, my God, everybody here has served as a mentor for me and set me straight. I mean, we wouldn't have the VBOC if it wasn't for that great lady back there mentoring me to get off my butt and go do it. Gina Sacripante is one as well. And then we all, like, especially in the military, if you study history, there are great examples out there. You know, I always quote and lean on what Abraham Lincoln did. And when if anyone read the book, Cast of Team of Rivals, right, where he brought in people that were his rivals that ran against him to make them part of his cabinet. There's nothing better than that. When you take people who are against you and motivate them to work with you in the most tumultuous time in our country's history, I mean, that's an example to follow, to build a team, to bring them together. Teddy Roosevelt, right, was a guy who was small in stature, went out west, proved himself, did great things. If anyone knows the story of Chesty Puller, Lewis Puller, the Marine hero, I mean, he was denied the ability to gain a commission 5 times. He was a non-commissioned officer in the Marine Corps and fought to be a commissioned officer and was one of the greatest leaders in the Marine Corps ever. So he overcame odds to do great things.
What are you most proud of?
Right now? God.
Right this second.
Right this second. My family, my wife, that's probably what I'm most proud of. And then the work that we're doing at Mount Carmel.
What's your favorite thing about the Springs?
People. Clearly, when we decided to do this, and Cindy and I, because Cindy works for the city, is, you know, we're in a place that I'm sure other communities have similar things, but when I look around, you know, just like I said, in the last 2 days, Bryan had me with city council because he's a friend. I was in the mayor's office talking about this, and you can't do those things without a community that welcomes your mission and allows you access. So for me, I knew this was a great place for military members and community to come together, but I experience it every day. And for me, it's not the mountains, it's not the lack that there's no oceans, it's not the skiing, it's the people here that for me have been what made me come here and made me stay.
What needs work? What would you fix with your magic wand?
Bring an ocean closer. So just like with any community, you have to evolve and make sure that people are continuing to stay focused on what's right. You just saw a momentous election, the mayor election. And we had the privilege at Mount Carmel of bringing all the, Bryan blew me off because he had to do something else. But we had all the city council, people running for city council, and all the mayor candidates came to Mount Carmel. It was pretty fantastic to watch them talk and then mingle with veterans. And then one of my board members, Peter Buckle, said, hey, do that again with the two candidates that are left. So we were able to bring people together to watch the two candidates come together. And if you saw what Wayne and Yemi did, that commercial about coming, pretty fantastic that you had two rivals and then they came together and said, we all have to work together to be better. So to me, that's pretty fantastic that our community is taking the way ahead, working with Yemi, working with Bryan to take the city council and a brand new mayor to, even do more of what John Suthers set the stage for. And I'm hoping that the military veteran in the community can come together for all of those things.
I'm going to ask you a couple more questions, and then we'll see if the audience has any. As a history buff, I guess if you could have a cup of coffee with any historical figure, who would it be?
Lincoln.
Lincoln.
For sure, Lincoln. Eisenhower.
Oh, you only get one. No. There's only enough coffee for two of you.
It would be Lincoln.
Lincoln?
It would be Lincoln because of what he overcame.
Mm-hmm.
I read an article about him of all his and here's a lesson for everybody. Lincoln failed 20 times throughout his local elections, national elections, different things, different tragedies in his life. He failed 20 times at something that's marked, you can actually see it, and became the President of the United States. And then, oh, by the way, what was he gifted with? Probably the worst thing that our nation could have gone through, and he led through it.
Okay. But number two would be Eisenhower.
Amongst others.
If you had a little extra coffee.
Amongst others. And look at Eisenhower, right? Eisenhower had no combat experience. He was a humble guy who led our nation through the other most tumultuous time, which is the ultimate invasion of D-Day and the defeat of the Third Reich.
Mm-hmm. What would you talk about that's not military with Abraham Lincoln and Eisenhower?
Probably what they eat.
Yeah. Cheese and crackers?
Yes.
A cheese and crackers situation? Then you're probably not having coffee if it's a cheese and cracker.
Oh yeah, there's no coffee with cheese.
No,
it's Danish with the coffee.
Danish with the coffee.
Cheese and crackers with a good red wine or some beer.
I like closing with this one. It's the day of your high school graduation. What advice do you give yourself?
Oh my God. Learn how to read. Seriously, I didn't value that much. How I got through school and a master's degree is beyond me. And Cindy laughs at me because I do audiobooks now. But there's so much to be gained from the knowledge of books and what we can learn from history and other people. I do it with my ears, not my eyes, and I'm doing a lot of it lately. And I just encourage everybody that isn't doing it now, and if books aren't your thing, do audiobooks, because you can always learn something from history.
Okay. Do we have, this mic is on, Dave, the one over here? Do we have questions from the audience? And Tracy, are you going to run the mic out? All right, thank you. We'll get you a microphone because we're recording, and that way we can pick it up. So.
Well, since you ended on the reading part, so 2 questions. What are you reading now? And then second is, what would you recommend that we read?
Well, my new hobby is golf. So I'm enamored with anything dealing with golf. And then Against All Odds is a book that is remarkable. It tells the story of Audie Murphy in the 3rd Infantry Division from the time they landed in North Africa to the time that they went into Nuremberg after D-Day. And the reason why this is so important is if you look at the resiliency of the human beings, The 15th Regiment landed in North Africa with about 1,500 troops, and 22 months later, only 2 of them were still fighting, right? It doesn't mean that they all perished. They got wounded. They went to other units. So the 2 that were still fighting 22 months later, one was Private Audie Murphy, and one was his company commander, Captain Ware. Ware became the battalion commander. Audie became a company commander, from private to company commander. His story is remarkable, and Colonel Ware's story is remarkable too, because, you know, everybody knows about Audie Murphy, Medal of Honor, came out of the Army, struggled, was an actor, and ended up dealing with severe post-traumatic stress, alcoholism, and actually died in a plane crash in 1975. Colonel Ware went into Vietnam and fought in the Tet Offensive, became the 1st Infantry Division commander, and was killed in a helicopter crash in Vietnam in 1969. It's an amazing story of that unit and in the American spirit and fighting through what you can't imagine. So it's against all odds. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Can you talk about the difference in leadership in the military, your transition into the civilian world, and how leadership is different as a civilian?
So probably the biggest difference in the military is in the institution. You look at somebody and you know who they are and what they do. You see their name, you see their rank, you know what position they're in, and you can make an initial judgment call. That person's been in for 5 years, they've led this many people, here's their role. And in the Army that I was part of, the mission focused and the value set is embedded across the ranks. So the biggest challenge when you come out of an organization like that, where everybody's focused, in many cases it's life or death, is you come out and you have to gauge people, right? Because they don't have a uniform on. You don't know what their values are, and you have to gauge what is it that makes this person tick, and how can you get the most out of them, and how can you communicate effectively. Nobody in the military is a robot. Nobody in the military takes orders blindly. It's part of a team, and everybody works hard together. And when I transitioned, what I've learned is be more patient, listen more intently, and get to know people, because you can't read them by what they're wearing. You know, that's kind of a cliche. But one of the things I adopted probably 4 years after getting out is, who knows the Great American Theory, or the Golden Rule. What's the Golden Rule? Right. Here's what I believe in, right? The Golden Rule is great, but I've adopted the Golden Rule Plus, and this ties into being out of the military and dealing with people. The Golden Rule Plus is treat people how they want to be treated, not how you want to be treated, right? Not everyone has the same value set, right? In the military, there's 7 values. Do you know what they are? Loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, personal courage, and integrity. And everyone in the institution is rowing in that direction. And then when you're out, you don't know what somebody's value set is. But if you use the Golden Rule Plus, you get to know the people, you figure out what motivates them, not what motivates you, and you act accordingly. And some people, well, what do you mean? You don't uphold standards? Well, you sure do. You don't let someone get away with something, but you find out what motivates them and act accordingly. You know, here's an example that is too long of an answer. Am I okay?
No, you're good.
Like, you know, my military culture is time. right? You got to get something done by this time, and everyone's rowing to do that. There are people out there that will panic if you say, I need this done by Tuesday, right? And normally what I found out is if you don't approach it that way, you say, when can you get it done? And normally they can get it done by Monday. So to me, it's about understanding what motivates people, understanding what their values are, and capitalizing on their values, not your values, but finding out what makes them good, what motivates them, and capitalizing on it. To me, that's the biggest things that I've learned.
You ready, Gina? Yep.
So,
Hello, Gina.
Bob,
Yes.
I know that you receive calls at all times at night with people who are needing help, who might make a difference between life and death. How do you manage that stress? How do you, yeah.
Well, to me, it's not stressful at all. I actually, I love doing it. If in my role as executive director, I'm not, as they say, in the trenches, right? I'm not a case manager, but and it's so easy, right? And I'll give you a couple of examples. Like if I get a call from someone or a referral from somebody and I can engage them, because what we do saves lives, right? I'll give you an example from Jonathan Liepert, right? Jonathan was is a adjunct professor at UCCS. He called me about 2 months ago and said, hey, I have a student that, this was a Friday afternoon, not after happy hour, right? No, it was actually it was actually a Thursday afternoon at about happy hour. I probably had a beverage. The lovely Sinset had white wine, I had red wine. And he said, I need this kid to get some help because he's in my class and he's not good. So I said, tell me a little bit about him. And he said, well, former Navy, had some behavioral health issues, going through a family challenge, and he's isolated. So with something like that, I figure out a way within my schedule, if Gina isn't tasking me with something, I have, hey, what's he doing tomorrow? Can he come to Mount Carmel or can I go to him? I'm meeting with 2 people tomorrow morning that fit that. Thank you. But this one kid, young man, I was able to go up to Monument, because that's where he was. I had coffee with him, and this is what makes me tick, ladies and gentlemen. So I sat down with him to have coffee, and because I knew his story, I said, tell me about what's going on. And he kind of laid it out for me. Isolation, no purpose, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking next chapter. So within half an hour of my discussion with this great guy who was a former Navy, you should have seen the expression on his face and the change. So as I'm sitting with him, I text Rich Gagne, who's our veteran service officer, because he said, I need my benefits better. Roger runs Next Chapter. He said, I need a counselor. Text Roger. And I text Mark Smith because he needs a job. So as I'm sitting with him, the 3 of them respond to the texts. And I'm fired up, right? Because right there, and I showing him, and he's crying. There's tears coming down his face. So from hopelessness came hope, and it wasn't hard. And Monday morning, I said, you good over the weekend? He said, yep, I'm good. Monday morning, he came to Mount Carmel, and he left there skipping, right? Now, I haven't followed up in a couple weeks, but he went from isolation to being connected to a veteran peer group, to having a lead on employment, to getting a counselor. So to me, I don't get to do that every day, but to do those things, it motivates me. Unless I'm in the gym, then I don't know what to do. I have to stop working out and then go into the call. But to me, that's great stuff. And I'm in awe if whoever's in the human support business, when you're dealing with people at their worst, and my staff does it every day, it is draining to see people at their worst and try to make them better. But to me, that's not stress. That I like doing it.
I think we have time for. Oh.
Or we're at dinner and he gets those calls. I'm stressed by it, but he's fine.
I think we have time for one more question, if anybody else has anything. If not, Going once, twice, 3 times? Okay.
What would you change about your leadership style as you see it today? Have you had advice or thoughts about how you would like to improve yourself as a leader?
Well, if you talk to Gina, right, and I've been at this for 9 years, I'm not going to put words in her mouth, but she would say I was probably a lot more impatient at the beginning, and when there were people that were against me, or I didn't think were aligned with me, I would be very frustrated very quickly. And what I've learned is just because people aren't with you doesn't mean they're against you, right? So I would tell you probably the biggest thing I've learned is use these, not this, right? Listen to people, and just because they're not on board with what you're doing, maybe your way isn't the right way. Maybe it's a way, and maybe their way may be just as effective. So I think I would say what I've learned the most is be more patient, listen to people that may not be with you but not against you. They're just doing it a different way, and then motivate them to keep rowing. How's that, Gina? Pretty good self-assessment? Thank you.
Words to end on. Can we get a round of applause for Paul McLaughlin? Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
So once again, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and a thank you to our sponsors, Phil Long Dealerships, Firma IT Solutions, El Pomar Foundation, Stockman, Cass, Ryan & Company, and Notes Live. Next month, COS CEO will be on August 9th with Greg Raymond. Greg is the president of Children's Hospital Colorado Southern Region. You can find ticket information at csbj.com/events. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.